Hey everyone, Jim Branscombe here, back again for another edition of In the Mouth of Cinemadness. This is a sub-series of the Cinematic Void vlog where I talk about different movies, TV shows, and other forms of media that had a profound impact on me at various points in my life. Now I take all those things as if they're ingredients, I put them all in a giant pot, I cook them up, and now I'm serving you what is the delicious thing that is now known as Cinematic Void. And as I'm using really terrible food, puns, metaphors, whatever you want to call it, and since Thanksgiving is coming up, I figured it'd be a good time to talk about one of my favorite slasher movies that just so happens to take place on Thanksgiving. And I am talking about 1987's Blood Rage, aka Nightmare at Shadow Woods, which is a really ridiculous title, but I think the apartment complex that this movie takes place around is actually called Shadow Woods, which I don't know. I don't think I would want to stay at a place, but it's also Florida, so I guess your options are slim. I mentioned that this movie was released in 1987, but was actually made in 1983 and sat on a shelf until, finally got a theatrical release and home video release, and then kind of fell in limbo. Admittedly, this was a movie that I was not aware of back in the day when I was renting all kinds of crazy horror movies from the video store, and, much later, it was just kind of lost in the shuffle, and I know a lot of people like to act like, oh, I've seen this, I saw this back in the day, haven't you seen this? It's like, no, it's like, I've seen a lot of things, but there's also a ton of things I haven't seen, and this just was one of them, and in fact, it wasn't even really on my radar. So in 2016, when this got announced for a Blu-ray release through Arrow Video, I was kind of intrigued, so I kind of just pre-ordered and got it blind, and sitting here on the shelf, and I don't know, there's a couple different cuts. There's a theatrical cut, and then this edition has the extended cut that has all the missing gore and a bunch of things, and that was the one I decided to watch first. So I was like, if I'm gonna watch a slasher movie, I'm gonna watch the most violent version of it. And I don't know, I had a great time with it. And for those of you who haven't seen Blood Rage, back in the day, there's these two young kids that are twin brothers, and one of them's good, one of them is evil. The evil one actually kills a couple people at a drive-in and then gets taken and put in an institution. However, a bunch of years later, that brother breaks out of the institution, and it just so happens to be Thanksgiving.
Looks like you're gonna get a chance to meet the rest of the family. My psychotic brother just escaped.
However, you soon realize that the brother that was in the institution actually wasn't the bad one. The good one had been put away, and the bad one had been, living his best life, and now that he knows his brother is broken out and free, it just allows him to get back to doing his favorite pastime, killing people. This movie is a lot of fun. It's got ultra gory effects by Ed French, who worked on such things as Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, Sleepaway Camp, and The Stuff, and eventually went on to do things like Terminator 2, and it also has one of the best catchphrases of any horror movie ever.
It's not cranberry sauce.
This Blu-ray came out in 2016, and I had just started Cinematic Void in 2016. It started February that year, and I think this Blu-ray came out in July, I think. And as I said, bought it blind, had a great time with it, and when it started getting closer to November and doing a Void screening, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should try to do Blood Rage. I looked at a couple private collector prints and saw there was a few 35 millimeters out there. And I knew Arrow had put out the Blu-ray, and I just kind of hit them up to see if they had theatrical rights in order for me to clear and be able to show the movie in a movie theater. Before I get into the details about that screening, I kind of want to talk a little bit about Thanksgiving film curation, or film screenings in general, especially on the cult film end of the spectrum. And there's not a lot of Thanksgiving set horror films. Obviously now that Eli Roth has Thanksgiving, which started out as a fake trailer in the Grindhouse movie, but there wasn't a lot back in 2016. In fact, the only other real slasher movie that took place on Thanksgiving was called Home Sweet Home, that stars the guy that was Body by Jake. And it's fun, but there wasn't really any materials available for it. And I guess there was a couple of killer turkey movies. There's Thanksgiving, and before that in the 70s, there's Blood Freak, about a genetically engineered killer giant monster turkey that was also militantly straight edge because he was just killing drug dealers, which is a lot of fun, but again, not a lot of materials and not really anything that was screenable, unfortunately. There's also The Mutilator, which the director kind of hinted at that it was a Thanksgiving set slasher, but The Mutilator, under its alternate name Fall Break, actually indicates that it's about just students on a fall break and not necessarily Thanksgiving. So I did screen it for Thanksgiving one year, and it's a fun movie, it's a great movie, but it's not exactly a Thanksgiving slasher. And usually my Thanksgiving screenings are on Black Friday when I used to do them, so I ended up doing a lot of mall horror because, you know, shopping, malls, that kind of stuff. So I've definitely done Dawn of the Dead a few times. I've done Chopping Mall, and I've done Phantom of the Mall. But yeah, Thanksgiving season's kind of like a weird black hole for film programming. And like, you know, unless you're showing like planes, trains, and automobiles, like there's not really a real Thanksgiving staple, especially on the cult film end of the spectrum. And just to throw out a few more factoids and information before I get into the details of my screening, I don't know why I'm adding stuff. I mean, I guess could have just basically, I'll talk about the screening after I talk about this stuff. The film was directed by John Grismer, who only directed one other movie, which was called Scalpel. And if you haven't seen Scalpel, it's a really unique movie. It's the polar opposite of the bonkersness of Blood Rage. It's more of a Southern Gothic horror movie. Definitely worth checking out. It also features the first acting appearance of Ted Raimi. Yes, Ted Raimi, brother Sam Raimi, who played Henrietta in Evil Dead 2 and has had tons of roles in his brother's films. I actually got the opportunity to talk to Ted a little bit about this movie when I had him out for his screening of Skinner. And, you know, Ted was very appreciative. He's like, that was the movie that got my foot in the door and got me all kinds of jobs. And like most 80s slashers, this movie has a great, catchy electronic soundtrack by Richard Enhorn, who also did Don't Go in the House, The Prowler, and Shockwaves. I'm actually surprised that this doesn't have a fancy, nice, like, you know, vinyl reissue or, you know, put on vinyl for the first time, because the soundtrack's really killer. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some things that are holding it up, but eventually someone's gonna figure it out and put this out on vinyl, and I think it's one of the great, like, underrated horror scores out there. So now I'll get into my screening back in 2016. I booked a print from a private collector, although it was a theatrical cut, which meant some of the gore, if not most of the gore, wasn't going to be in the 35mm print, but there wasn't a DCP, and the only other way to show it was Blu-ray, and let's be real, a lot of people in LA aren't coming out for a Blu-ray screening. They were like, we want to see it on film. So, all right, we're going to watch it on film. But just so you know, it's not going to be like as gory as the uncut Blu-ray. But, you know, it's one of those format wars things. And maybe I'll do another vlog about, you know, formats and their selling points and that kind of stuff. But let's just say the demand was for 35mm, so booked a 35mm print. So with the print secured, I contacted Arrow Video to clear the theatrical rights so I could actually screen it. They okayed it. Screening went on sale, actually sold out pretty quickly, and then Arrow contacted me and let me know that, oh, well, there's a little hiccup with the theatrical rights. So I had to go talk to the people that own Blood Rage outright. And the way I would refer to it, they had a Blood Rage lawyer, which seems kind of weird, but apparently part of the weirdness with Blood Rage was that it was actually kind of bootlegged when it went on VHS. Like, you know, the people that owned the movie, the distributor had like just kind of put it out, and there was a whole weird legal stuff that went with it. And eventually, like, they ended up suing the distributor that was bootlegging Blood Rage and got the rights and then controlled it, and then had contacted Arrow Video to put it out. But I talked to them and they ended up being nice, and they were just happy that I actually contacted them to clear the rights, because there had been many attempts to screen Blood Rage and no one had contacted them. And I don't really blame the other people that had tried to screen Blood Rage before I did. A lot of them more or less just didn't know who the rights holder was and didn't know how to clear rights. And, you know, they probably tried to negotiate and just kind of got shut down.
How can they show that on TV?
But at the end of the day, I got the okay to screen it, and the screening went great. I should mention that, you know, I did an ill-advised pie eating contest, and originally I was supposed to do pumpkin pies as the pies that people were supposed to eat, and then we get a bunch of prizes from Arrow Video and stuff like that. Unfortunately, the day after Thanksgiving, there wasn't a lot of pumpkin pies left over, but there was tons of sweet potato pies. So the pies in the pie eating contest were sweet potato, and it was one of the most grueling, miserable experiences I ever watched anyone have to go through. Like, I don't think anyone really finished a pie. I think whoever made it the most ended up winning all the Blu-rays, because, like, God, it was just, the sweet potato is very dense, and it's not the kind of pie you want to, like, eat as fast as you can. In fact, you know, it starts turning against you pretty early on. But besides that disaster of the pie eating contest, the screening went great. And A couple years later, once Arrow started working with AGFA to, handle their theatrical rights, it became easier to screen Blood Rage. In fact, now there's countless screenings of Blood Rage across the country around Thanksgiving time, and that's really cool. And, I'm not saying I'm instrumental in making that happen, but, I did put in the work to make my screening happen and make it a legit screening. So yeah, even though it's great that Blood Rage is available on home video and probably on different streaming platforms right now, if you get a chance, go see it in a movie theater with the audience. It will absolutely kill. Obviously it doesn't always feel like the most Thanksgiving of Thanksgiving movies because one, it takes place in Florida and there's like swamps and it like feels like a summer movie. But when you see the great Louise Lasler on the floor eating Thanksgiving leftovers, just kind of sad and broken, isn't that really what Thanksgiving's about? The misery? Or maybe not. Maybe it's about family. Anyway, that's going to wrap up this In the Mouth of Cinemadness. Tell me what you think. When was the first time you saw Blood Rage? Or if you haven't seen it yet, do you want to go check it out? And, maybe after you guys have your turkey or tofurkey like I'm going to have, you pop it in and, celebrate Thanksgiving the Blood Rage way. Until next time, see you in the void, and yes, that's not cranberry sauce.
That is not cranberry sauce.